Okay, so we're back for another deep dive. And you guys have really outdone yourselves this time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with the sources. King Philip's War. It's one of those things, everybody kind of remembers the name from
Yeah.
like high school history,
Yeah, it's familiar.
but nobody really remembers the details.
No, definitely not.
And it's a big deal, right? I mean,
Right.
it's a real turning point.
Yeah. And I think what's so important about this deep dive is that we're not just going to look at it as like a war.
Right.
This was a clash of cultures. This
Yeah.
was about the human cost of expansion.
Totally.
And it's about how this war, how the things that happen, how they still kind of echo even today.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that maybe we don't think about in our everyday lives.
Right.
But it's like so influential
Oh, absolutely.
to kind of how things ended up the way they are.
It set a pattern
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Okay, so where do we even begin with this? It's 1675, right?
Yep, 1675, we're in New England. English colonies, they're growing like crazy.
Yeah, they're just booming, aren't they?
They're booming, expanding,
Yeah.
and they're pushing right up against indigenous land.
Okay, so already we've got a problem
Yeah,
because there's not a lot of room for both of them.
no. And not just like a physical space problem. I mean, you've got broken treaties.
Yeah.
You've got, these two cultures who really just fundamentally don't understand each other.
Right, like completely different ways of life.
Completely different worldviews.
And they're trying to occupy the same space.
Yeah, and this is where the whole idea of like the balance of power
Okay.
becomes so important because you've got the colonists, they're organized,
Right.
they've got increasing numbers. Oh yeah, crucially, they've got firearms.
Right.
And then on the other side, you've got the indigenous tribes who are much more decentralized.
Yeah.
They're relying on traditional weapons, and it just put them at a major disadvantage.
Right. They can't really compete, can they?
No, and I think, you look at Metacom.
Yeah. King Philip.
Yeah, exactly. King Philip to the English.
Yeah.
And he really understood this.
So.
He
yeah.
understood that their very way of life, their survival, was at stake.
Okay, so this all kind of kicks off with the execution of 3 Wampanoag men, right,
Yeah, that was the spark.
by the colonists.
Yeah.
And I mean, can you imagine, like, the anger,
Oh,
feeling of injustice? I mean, that just,
yeah.
I feel like that just lit a fire.
It did, and Metacom, he was, what a leader, A brilliant strategist.
Yeah.
Totally driven by the need to protect his people, protect their homeland.
So he wasn't just sitting back and
No.
taking it.
No, he was proactive.
Yeah.
He knew he had to do something.
So what did he do?
He starts forming alliances.
Okay. With who?
The Narragansett,
Okay.
the Nipmuc, and a bunch more. He was building a coalition
Wow.
because he knew they couldn't do it alone.
So this wasn't just one tribe versus the English. This was like,
This was a movement,
wow.
a collective response to a shared threat.
And they were fighting for their survival.
Absolutely.
Wow. So, all right, we've got this war, right? But we're not talking about some, like, far off battlefield.
Oh, no.
This is like,
This was happening right on the colonists' doorstep.
it was in their backyards.
Yeah, brutal raids.
I mean, the sources, they talk about
Oh, it's terrifying.
Swansea, Brickfield, Deerfield, like whole towns
Mhm.
engulfed in flames. And I mean, like, imagine
Can you imagine?
you're a colonist, you've built this life for yourself,
Yeah.
and suddenly
Suddenly there's violence
your whole world's on fire.
right outside your door.
I mean, do you think that...
How could it not shape their views?
Right. Like, how could that not completely change how they viewed
Yeah, their whole perception
Native American?
of Native Americans, yeah. It was terrifying.
It's crazy. And it wasn't just one-sided, though, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Well, I mean,
This war was brutal for everyone involved.
everyone...
Heavy casualties on both sides, displacement. Both sides were using scorched earth tactics.
What does that even mean? Like, scorched earth?
They were burning everything.
Right.
Crops, homes, anything
Just
to
like they-
deny the enemy resources.
Wow. Just to completely cripple the other side.
Yeah, to make it uninhabitable.
Wow. There's a story, it's in the sources, about a woman, Mary Rowlandson.
Oh, yes. I read that account too.
And she was captured, right? During a raid.
Yeah, in Lancaster.
Yeah.
She was held captive for months.
Months. Wow. That must have been...
Oh, it's a harrowing account
And it just kind of, just shows you the suffering.
on both sides.
Yeah, the fear, the loss.
Yeah, it's a reminder.
Like a real human reminder.
Yes. That war dehumanizes everyone.
Okay.
No matter who wins, everyone loses something.
Yeah, it's not about winning. It's just about
It's just loss.
loss, yeah. So, okay, this war, it finally ends in 1678, right?
Mm.
Metacom is killed.
Yeah.
The Indigenous Alliance is defeated. And that's kind of it, right? Like the English basically control New England now.
Well, on the surface, yes.
Like,
It looks like a decisive victory for the English.
right.
But the cost was immense.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about entire indigenous populations being decimated,
Wow.
their land seized. The war didn't just end in 1678. Its impact, the scars, they lasted for generations.
So it wasn't just about like the immediate fighting. It's about,
It's about the long-term consequences.
right, and how it kind of shaped everything that came after.
Exactly.
So it's like this whole thing, this war.
Yeah.
It creates this like foundation of mistrust,
Oh, absolutely.
animosity, and like, how do you even come back from that
It's hard, and I think, sadly, in a lot of ways, it set a pattern.
for how westward expansion would unfold?
Yeah, this idea that indigenous peoples were the enemy,
Right.
that they were savages, that their land was ours for the taking. It's a narrative that unfortunately justified a lot of brutality and injustice.
And it's kind of crazy to think about how we're still dealing with the fallout from that today, like
Yes.
issues of land rights, cultural preservation. It's all connected to this war.
Yeah, and it's not just about, pointing fingers or blaming.
Right.
It's about understanding
Understanding the history.
understanding how we got here.
Yeah, and how we can do better.
Exactly. Because this war, it's a reminder
Of what happens when
cultures clash, when there's no empathy.
there's no understanding.
Yeah, and when power is so imbalanced.
Yeah. And it's like, even though it happened centuries ago,
Right.
the echoes are still here.
They're still felt today.
Wow. Well, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about.
I hope so.
King Philip's War, it's not just some dusty old history.
No.
It's a story about real people, real consequences.
Yeah, and it's a story that's still unfolding.
Yeah. So, you guys listening, what do you think? How do you think things could have been different?
What can we learn from this?
Yeah, what can we learn from this to make sure something like this never happens again?
It's a question we all need to be asking
Yeah.
and answering